and welcome to blockchaingamer.biz weekly roundup. You can find all of our latest news on blockchaingamer.biz. Follow us on Twitter at BCGBiz and connect with us through our brand new page on LinkedIn, blockchaingamer.biz. Today is Friday, the 15th of September, and I'm your host, Jenny Jordan, and with me is co-host John Jordan. Hi, John.
Hello, how are you doing? Back to your favourite hat, I see.
Good. Yes, back to my favourite. Ultra. I do like them as a company as well.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
I've got a bit of respect for what they're doing, but I really like this cap.
It's a high quality cap. Anyone else with high quality caps? We have a head that will wear
And
them.
Ultra actually, there was some news about them this week, wasn't it? They are upgrading their platform to go on Electron, I think.
Oh right, okay. Yes.
Anyway,
Oh,
talk us through briefly the news
Yes.
of the week, John, please.
Yeah, I'll quickly go through the news of the week. Okay, so quite a lot of news actually this week. So there were two two big games that did some stuff. So Zynga launched the NFTs for its Sugartown game. The game's not out yet. This is just the NFTs. It was a free mint, and the floor price is now $300. That's pretty good if you were on that free mint, which was slightly weirdly geo-fenced, but anyway. So Rec League went live as well, another NFT-based game from Enway and Animoca. That's got a bit slower, so it's sort of possible 10,000-ish sort of NFTs that could be minted out there. Only about 8% of those have been minted so far. I played a little bit of it and was rubbish at it, so it's also sort of really sort of hardcore game. And I'm going to have to do some research on working out because I just got beaten without even doing any damage to other people, so I haven't got a clue there. But anyway, other people seem to be enjoying it and sort of good rewards on the leaderboard there that runs for 10 days. Couple of games fiddling around with what blockchain they're on. So Life Beyond, which currently has its NFTs on Polygon, is going to be building out a Bitcoin-based economy for some in-game assets, land. I don't know if it means they're coming off Polygon entirely. Didn't mention Polygon at all, but basically they're going to be doing some stuff on Bitcoin using the new BRC20 standard. So that'll be interesting to see. And Polygon farming game Pixels is moving to Sky Mavis's Ronin chain. So those are the two big things. And actually, you created a new article, haven't you? So that's pretty cool. What do we call it? Chain. I can't remember it. Chain jumpers, chain switches, didn't we?
As much for our readers, actually, as for ourselves too. It's just you do realise there's quite a lot of these switches now. So games that have been existing for a while. They've been trying on a chain, and then they're either taking on this multi-chain approach where we would update that too, but more maybe significantly those who completely migrate all their assets and everything onto a different chain, but just to keep track of it really. Because you tend to forget quite a lot of it. So it's just sort of a collection of that in sort of one place. So we'll be updating that regularly. So come back to the website.
Have a search for chain switches on the site. Okay, what else have we got? Shrapnel, sort of highly anticipated shooter, announced that it wasn't going to let US players cash out of the game. The game's not even live yet, but obviously they're worried about the SEC. So everyone else can sort of cash out stuff, but US players won't be able to cash out, at least in the short term. Also interesting, they said they're going to be putting out a version of the game before the end of this year, paid version that they suggested, which is sort of interesting. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. Some news from the Oasis Japanese gaming blockchain. It launched the first version of its mobile wallet, and also said it was doing a deal with the Lootverse people, or officially they're called Adventure Gold, aren't they? So the Adventure Gold token is coming to Oasis, and they're going to try and do some sort of collaborative stuff people can build using those assets on Oasis, because the whole point of sort of Lootverse is it's these open assets.
And they're kind of an interesting. Sorry to interrupt. They're kind of an interesting force, or you want to call them, in the industry, because as more and more projects are now sort of adapting this more mobile, what would you say, going kind of mainstream and scaling, but those are developers working, fully on chain and building decentralized, and they're all about sort of almost look into all the strengths that blockchain is adding to their games, and really building on that, rather than sort of maybe a little bit shying away from from that, and they're not sort of shy of talking about it either. We are fully on chain, and that's how it's going to be, and that's it. So yeah, I just find that kind of interesting from that point of view.
Absolutely. So what else? We've got a few more things. So Sony is going to be building its own Web3 focused blockchain. I mean, I wouldn't say they're going to be jumping onto games on that. It's actually, you have to be a bit careful with Sony. So they're called Sony Network Communications. Yeah, so it's sort of a part of Sony that handles tech stuff. They're doing their own blockchain. We'll see what uses that is used for. Obviously, maybe some gaming stuff in the future. You can imagine that at some point being the foundation for PlayStation blockchain stuff, but they've not even started yet. So they've just set up with this company called Startail in Singapore, doing a joint venture there. Pretty small scale, I think, but interesting. And there's sort of there's interesting. So I wrote an opinion piece on my Substack about how there was finally in 2023 we'd hit $1 billion of investment into blockchain game sector this year, which is obviously much slower. I mean, running at about sort of 14% of what it was last year, so very, very much slower than last year. And August had been awful, but then there's a whole bunch of announcements, which obviously when stuff is announced is not when stuff is money necessarily changes hands or whatever. But anyway, so Animoca raised $20 million to build out, its Mocaverse NFT ecosystem. GamePhilos raised $8 million for its game Age of Dinos, which is running on the Xterio platform and will be on B&B's 4X PC and mobile game. And an Indonesian company called Mythic Protocol raised $6.5 million for some, what I'm calling some mad Web3 caper. There is a game there, but there's a whole bunch of other weird stuff going on there. They're doing some DeFi thing and some UGC thing, and it all seems a little bit weird to me. But we'll see what happens there. So yeah, so I guess after this sort of summer break, we're back into sort of into building and announcing stuff, and obviously there's token, was it 2048 in Singapore? Just finished now, is
49 even.
49, isn't it? 48, 48 was last year. So that's happened. There's not been actually that many announcements, some announcements around that, but nothing amazing. But obviously.
Well, I think kind of Animoca there, aren't they? And like, some of these news that would have been released otherwise if this event wasn't on has been released sort of in it as a connection to that event. The same with the Oasis stuff. So news comes out. But it's not actually.
No, news would have potentially come out earlier, but they've held it back for that. And there's one bit of news I missed, which is you're going to talk about a little bit. So, NFL Rivals, the mobile American football game with NFTs in it from Mythical Labs, was the first blockchain game to get featured on the Apple App Store, where it was Game of the Day, because obviously the NFL season started last week. So, and you have more insight into Mythical Games as you have been doing journalistic stuff.
Yeah. Just spoke to John Linden last night. So there'll be an interview coming up sometime next week regarding, well, not only NFL Rivals, but focused on obviously the recent success of that following the start of the NFL season, and since they launched in-app marketplace, kind of some interesting numbers there. And what's kind of interesting there is how he said sort of this resistance we've seen from the app stores that's now sort of starting to soften a little bit towards NFTs and blockchain. And kind of Mythical plays a significant part there in kind of teaching them, actually educating the app stores, and NFL Rivals has just been a great example, and how they integrate their NFTs into the apps, and so just really interesting stuff coming out of that. And also obviously looking at Blancos now that's announced a couple of weeks back that they're going to go mobile first. It's not going to be giving up on PC, so that will remain there, but it'll be quite a different game, launched on mobile sometime in 2024. So we spoke about that and lots more, so keep your eyes open for that interview next week.
And I guess we'll talk about things that come out next week. My next episode of my podcast is coming out on Star Atlas. So spoke to Michael Wagner, the CEO there. Had quite a kind of long, in-depth talk about sort of I don't know what they're doing, which is sort of funny because obviously they've had a bad 12 months. I didn't really want to talk all about that stuff because I think he's done a lot of sort of interviews about everything went wrong. So try to keep it positive. But it is interesting in the amount of stuff they're doing. And he's a very positive chap. I should say he's not one for sort of backing down. A bit like John Linden, the CEO of Mythical. He's always on the front foot. So yeah, hopefully that'll be interesting for people. So we have that article up there as well. And it really does sort of focus on the amount of stuff they're building. And it was actually interesting because they cut 75% of their staff, and he says they realised how inefficient they were because obviously they didn't have an office. They had all these people all the way around the world, and they were not sure what they were all doing. And I mean, I know you didn't talk about this with John, but same thing with Mythical Games. I mean, they've gone through some job cuts as well, and I think there's people are just realizing in tech in general and games in general that everyone was overstaffed. So you could, obviously not nice for people getting their jobs taken away from them. But you could most games companies could probably lose 25% of their staff and actually maybe improve their efficiency. But anyway,
now that's obviously talking about blockchain gaming in specifically how they've been struggling and potentially will keep struggle for quite a lot longer. We got Mavens as well coming out next week, exactly on the subject of 2023 not being quite such a success yet that many had anticipated in terms of blockchain games. However, now we've also had the Unity news, and obviously we don't cover that on our website, but that also weaves into this kind of how the game industry in general is struggling. And can you briefly talk about that, John, who knows a little bit more sort of generally about the games industry?
So there's been all this fuss in the games industry this week because Unity, which is the biggest sort of third-party game engine, although mainly makes its money from advertising now, has basically said it wants to change its licensing model so people are charged when their games are downloaded. So previously for Unity, you paid like a seat license fee. So if you have 10 of your developers are using Unity, you pay 10 times whatever the seat license is. There's different versions. There is a free private one or something. Anyway, so the problem with that for Unity, which is a public company, so you can buy the shares on the American Nasdaq, and it's worth like $14 billion, down a lot from what it was, but it's not profitable. So you have this company that's being used by hundreds of thousands of developers generating billions of dollars of revenue at app stores and this sort of thing, but it can't make money. And so, it's sort of you can understand. So basically, it's created this new model where it basically says from the start, I think start 2024, I think. But anyway, it's sort of phased in. You're going to start being charged per download. So if someone downloads your game, you'll be charged. I think the highest level is like 16 cents, and the lowest level is like 1 cent or something. Which, to some degree, if you were creating a business from scratch, seems reasonable. But obviously, for a lot of developers who are currently using Unity and paying whatever they're paying for it, they obviously go, well, I'm paying this at the moment, and now I'm going to get charged per download. And then they work out, well, I'm going to basically owe Unity like another $100,000 next year if this comes in. And most businesses just don't have spare hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially some of the small ones. And Unity's been very good at getting a lot of the small indie, 1-man, 2-man, 5-man teams. So obviously that's sort of a bit of an impact for them. But then Unity has sort of said, well, basically, if you use our ad system, so most of Unity's money comes from mobile advertising. If you use our ad system, you're sort of paying, I think, 1 cent. It really reduces the amount you pay up front per download or install. And obviously, if you're using their ad system, you're going to generate ad money as well. So that sort of, obviously, Unity are basically pushing people to use their ad system. Obviously, some games think we don't really want ads in our game, or maybe it's a game where some people, if you're doing games for kids, there's sort of restrictions around sort of what ads you can have in, and it's a bit more complicated. There's always sort of what we call edge cases. There's always someone saying, yeah, but my special business has this, and there's like people moaning about charity when you give away games for charities, how that works, and all right. So it's not been very well communicated by Unity, and maybe it's not a good plan. Maybe they have to backtrack on it. But basically, the fundamental reason, there's a really good article on GamesIndustry.biz about this. It's basically like Unity is not making enough money. If Unity doesn't make money and it can't be profitable, then at some point it can't survive as a company. At some point it will go bust. Then you won't have the engine at all. Yeah. So it's sort of, obviously I'm very hard nosed and business focused, and I kind of think, obviously they need to be profitable, so they need to work out how to do that. There's probably different ways of phasing it in, and maybe they're going to have a sort of a lower tier, so for the first million downloads you don't pay anything or something, But basically the problem sort of is there are people like games like Genshin Impact, which does $1 billion of revenue a year, uses Unity, and Unity doesn't really get paid, even probably millions of dollars from that developer. So how can it come up with a tiered system? And it probably needs to have a tiered system where it literally is just targeting the big companies. The problem there is sort of people as big as Genshin Impact can either probably switch to Unreal, which is again sort of fairly expensive, but maybe not that expensive, or they can build their own engine. So sort of it is. You can see Unity is in a slightly tricky situation that it's sort of a bit like you can think about it really as a government tax system. Governments always want to let's go and tax billionaires loads more, but then billionaires have really good tax lawyers, better than the government, and they work out how to get around the tax laws, or they move country or something, and then so you change the tax laws, and what happens is you end up taxing the sort of the middle classes who don't earn so much that they want to spend lots of money on a tax lawyer, and so you sort of end up having the wrong impact. So that's sort of Unity's problem. But in general, the games industry is very squealy at the moment. So anything that impacts the games industry, of some of the indie people who are very big on Twitter, and I guess of a more progressive hue, all those guys have got very squealy, and girls have got very squealy on Twitter, and there's been like a death threat thing and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a bit. The funny thing about death threat was apparently it was actually one of Unity's own developers who somehow put a death threat on the office or something in San Francisco, so they had to shut it down. But that's froth on the surface. There is fundamentally, Unity has to work out how to make money, and what everyone forgets is Epic makes money not from its engine but from Fortnite. So, obviously the good news is for other people who make engines like Godel engine, and there's a whole bunch of other sort of open source engines, and they're not as good as Unity. That's the reason people use Unity. Unity is sort of the best engine out there for lots of games, but they just gonna have to work out their business model. And maybe I don't know. I'm going to say, wouldn't I say that? Maybe blockchain can help them do that. I don't know. Maybe not, actually.
Blockchain is the answer to everything.
Although it is, I mean,
it's just kind of interesting how not interesting really, but I don't know how provocative it still is that companies actually have to make money, and they have to find ways to make money. And if something doesn't work, they have to try something else, and how other companies who are in the industry that also has to make money to survive does not understand it, and they have no sympathy for it whatsoever. They show no understanding, and they just take for granted that because it's been free, it should always be. They feel
it's not been free. So I mean, I can sort of understand both sides, and I definitely think Unity is not good at communicating this sort of stuff. So they've got their CEO is called John Riccicello, who used to be CEO of EA. Where basically everyone hated EA a lot back then. So EA was sort of like the most hated company. Now that's sort of spread around a bit in games. But Riccicello he's quite a provocative chap. I've spoken to him a few times. He's quite a robust sort of businessman. But he's not a touchy-feely sort of guy. He's a business guy. He used to work at I can't remember who was it, Procter and Gamble. His first job was selling ice cream or toothpaste or something. I can't remember. Procter and Gamble, I think. Yeah. So I think he gets sometimes goes out of his way to be a bit provocative to people, but it is and there was it's a good article on GamesIndustry.biz, and there was someone pointing out that the big issue here is nothing to do with Unity. The big issue here is games have had this massive growth curve for the last really 30 years, certainly the last sort of 5 years with COVID. Games companies, massive valuations, loads of money, everyone's doing brilliantly, hot, great. But it's sort of hit this fundamental issue now where there's still lots of people who don't play games. Obviously, we say there's 3 billion people who play games, 8 billion in the world. So obviously a lot of, as developing countries develop, then more people play games on mobile, I suppose. So there is sort of upside, but those are very hard to monetize sort of markets. And basically in the Western markets, there's not, most of us don't really have any more time we can spend playing games. We are sort of, games. People didn't used to play games. Now they play games on their phones, a couple of hours a day. Most people can't play games for another hour a day. There's not enough hours in the day. So there is this we've hit this sort of impasse where there's always more game developers every year. There's more game developers pumping out more games, but most of us in the world only have a certain amount of money, but certainly have a certain amount of time. So growth, we'll see what happens. But it was postulated that in general, growth in the industry is going to have to slow down a little bit, which means if more games come out, there's less there's less time or money pie to spread around. So you can't just, people like Unity can't just go, well, we're going to double our developer base and earn more money that way, because the developers aren't going to make money. So it was quite a clever article. It was saying, you think what Unity is doing bad, well, actually Unity is just telling you that the games industry is going to be really hard now for small developers as well. So we'll see. Yeah. Maybe that's where blockchain comes in and helps those guys out.
Okay, well, on that note, we are going to finish off, and we see you all back here next Friday.
Next Friday.
Have a good week.
See you there.